I understand, although I don't have in front of me, I understand that the shiurim tonight, today, for the entire day, are Leilui Nishmat Stanley Chera Kadosh Baruch Hu should be merachem and should have Leilui Neshama and nechama to the entire family. Ken Yeh Ratzon. Okay, so I just have to put this up. What I'd like to do first is to put, I'm going to put in the chat a link to a source sheet that is on Safaria. So anybody who wants to follow along with the source sheet, there it is. You can probably just click on that, and I'll go through that, so you can have it. Unfortunately, anybody who's on Instagram, I mean, unless there's somebody on Zoom who's also on Instagram wants to post it on there, then perhaps you could do that, but I'm not going to do that. So we're just going to go through the title of the shiur that we're doing for Yom Haasmaut and for the SCA the whole day, which is a beautiful, beautiful day of Torah. I've seen everybody who's speaking and the subjects. It's really exciting and wonderful, and I'm honored to be able to participate. The subject or the title for tonight's, I keep saying tonight, it's 10 p.m., so forgive me for saying that where I am, is why it will always be about the land. Always was, always will be. And the truth is, it's really very simple why that's the case. And so I want to talk a bit about why it is that is the case, why it's always has been and always will be about the land. So what we're going to do is I'm going to give a sense, an overview as to why it is that this is the case, that it's so much about the question of the Aretz itself. And then we'll look at some of the the sources that show very clearly that this is the case. The only way, however, to answer that is that although, of course, it is and always has been, will be about the land, it is not the land that is central here at all. The land is simply a means. It is a necessity for what is central. And what is central, of course, is the people. And the problem is that you cannot have a people without a land. And so I'm going to explain why. It sounds simple enough and may even sound cliche. We've heard that a lot, but I want to talk that out a bit to be able to understand why it is that you cannot have a people without a land. Because the truth of the matter is there are many Jews in the world today across the gamut of religiosity, some not religious at all, some extremely religious, who don't necessarily hold that there necessarily needs to be a land in order for us to be a functional people. Yes, I mean, everybody will agree that we need a Beit HaMikdash, and that, Yerushalayim, Benuya, L'Shana Haba Yerushalayim, and all of that, but, there are varying opinions as to how severely we really need this land in order for us to be, good, members of the nation, following Torah and mitzvot, and so on and so forth. What we have to remember, first of all, is that it all started with one person that was going to develop into a nation and a people. And the truth of the matter is, as the Chachamim say, it's all about him. He is the one that holds all of this together. The land is for him, the people are for him. Everything that HaKadosh Baruch Hu promised was for him. And that, of course, is Abraham Avinu. That's the source of the entire thing. So we have to be able to look at that and understand that and recognize that if we are anything, if there is value to us essentially at all, it is because of our grandfather, Abraham. Now, of course, the more that we live in line with Abraham, the more that we follow the Brit of Abraham, it's amazing and that's wonderful. But we cannot lose sight of the fact that everything that we are about is essentially Abraham, which is why we really don't open our mouths to HaKadosh Baruch Hu without saying that. You're supposed to stand in prayer in front of God 3 times a day. And the Hachamim made sure that when we open our mouths for prayer, we barely get anything out of our mouths with saying Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzhak, Elohei Yaakov. And of course, Yitzhak and Yaakov are the children of Abraham, and they are elements of a brit that was already established, Abraham. It's true that there's a special brit for Yitzhak, and true that there's a special brit for Yaakov, and that the brit of Abraham was essentially extended and developed through them. It's true that Yaakov Avinu ends up being the one that's called Israel, which is the goal in the first place, by starting with Abraham. But everything is based on Abraham. Without Abraham, there is nothing to talk about. So the land and the people are all tied to this one man. And I've said before, and I'm going to say it again tonight, it's important for us to recognize that although we certainly have, without question, a very clear tradition, right? When I say tradition, I mean there's drash, there's midrash, there are codified. I mean, how Rambam codifies these midrashim l'halacha, right? He puts them in and says these midrashim essentially are halachic, right? There's psak in the Mishneh Torah that this is the official story as far as the nation of Israel is concerned, with regards to Abraham's life pre God speaking to him. It was before HaKadosh Baruch Hu opens up with the first words, as far as we know in the Torah. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Abraham that you have to go El Haaretz Asher Areka, which is, of course, the first thing that HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Abraham. First thing that he says is you need to go for yourself to the land. Everything else, I mean, the first line of the dialogue certainly should be an indication as to the tenor of everything that is going to come after it. Although we have the traditions that are clear and codified and official traditions for us, and there's no question about them, as the Hachamim say, En mikra yotzeh midei pshuto, with all of the midrash and everything that helps to enhance and understand some underlying aspects of what it is that we are reading, the reality is that as far as the written Torah is concerned, the way that it presents us to it, the pshat in terms of how it is it presents us to us, is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu simply just began dialogue with Abraham Avinu out of the blue. There didn't seem to be any indication beyond simply HaKadosh Baruch Hu choosing Abraham to speak to him. And it would seem that there's only really one explanation for that. And everything that we have with regards to Midrash is to give a sense of why the explanation is the explanation. But the really only thing that we can say with regards to this is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu fell in love with Abraham Avinu. Now you say, what does that mean? HaKadosh Baruch Hu fell in love with Abraham Avinu. How do you say that about HaKadosh Baruch Hu? The same way that you say everything else about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You can borrow the terms and recognize that whatever it is that's going on over here is going on in terms of our human experience, right? So in the same way that we could say that HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves anyone, loves anything, which is a purely human trait, right? This is something that human beings do, human beings have. And when HaKadosh Baruch Hu speaks to us in the Torah, Dibra Torah Kelshon Bnei Adam, the Torah speaks in human terms. It uses this term to be able to speak about what it is that's going on between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the people of Israel. And one of the things that is spoken about is love, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has this undying, unconditional love. And we'll talk about that in a minute, in its core for Am Yisrael, for the nation of Israel. And that love begins with Abraham Avinu. And it seems that the love happens like that. There is a falling in love that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has with Abraham Avinu. And we can say that in the same way that we medaber b'shon ben Adam with everything else that HaKadosh Baruch Hu does in terms of his love. That there was something about Abraham that HaKadosh Baruch Hu fell in love with. And that essentially is what the Midrashim come to show. The Midrashim say, well, I mean, look at who this man was. You would probably fall in love with him too if you were HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Kabiyachol. Yeah? The man spends his entire time opening himself, looking to find God in everything that he experiences and everything that he does. And so, yes, HaKadosh Baruch Hu falls in love with Abraham. But why is it important that we say that or recognize that there's an element of that in the story? Because it doesn't need a reason. When we fall in love, we fall in love. There's so much complexity in it that we don't even know why it is that we're doing it or what it is that we're doing. We can give all the reasons that we want, but at the end of the day, HaKadosh Baruch Hu loved Abraham, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu recognized Abraham, and Abraham responded to that love in total. He committed himself entirely to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And there was a love affair that occurred between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Abraham. And so what HaKadosh Baruch Hu does is downright astonishing as far as God goes, right? Because what he does, what God does in his relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is, within his relationship with Abraham, is he binds himself to rules, which is something that, when you think about it, how does God do such a thing? He's HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There's no rules for God. He is Kol Yachol. HaKadosh Baruch Hu does whatever he wants, whenever he wants. That's the definition of what God is. I've said many times, if there were rules to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the rules would be God, not God. And what does HaKadosh Baruch Hu do? Out of his love for Avraham Avinu, he commits himself to confines and rules, which is what we call, essentially in how it's presented in Torah, Birit. There is a covenant that HaKadosh Baruch Hu enters into with Avraham, which simply means that HaKadosh Baruch Hu agrees to commit to a set of promises, commitments, rules that he will not abrogate under any circumstances. And that is important for us to remember, because when we say that HaKadosh Baruch Hu enters into a covenant, a brit, with Abraham Avinu, and it will not be abrogated under any circumstances, we are essentially saying that the love that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has for Abraham and his children, which we will talk about in a moment, is unconditional. For all intents and purposes, if one wishes to say, the condition was met by Abraham, and that is it. Now, that is not to say, and we're going to get into this, that is not to say that if the brit is breached by the children of Abraham Avinu at any point, that they will not be punished. They will absolutely be punished. And there are times where the punishments are profoundly severe as a result of breaking the brit. But punishment, as the Torah says to us, makes a point of saying to us, only comes from love. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't love and there was no care, there would be absolutely no need for punishment. So as the Torah says, Kasher yaser ishit beno, Adonai ruecha miyasereka. As a father chastises his son out of love, a parent chastises out of love and care for the child, so too HaKadosh Baruch Hu does to you. And that's why Shlomo HaMelech writes, Chosech shepto, soneh beno, that a person who doesn't chastise his child hates the child, doesn't care about the child, doesn't have love for the child, right? And so, et asher yohav Adonai yochiach, the one that HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves is the one that he chastises. And so it may very well be that the nation or the children of Avraham Avinu go against the covenant and brit that's established by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But the covenant that comes from the love of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to Abraham and his children is unconditional. It is never, ever abrogated. It doesn't go away. The Torah says that, and the reality of the matter is that I don't think that it requires a tremendous amount of proof. It's very clear that that's the case till today. If it were not the case, we would not be here, and our land would not be in our hands. But we hold that for now. Let's carry on with the progression. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves Avraham Avinu, and he loves Avraham Avinu so much that his children are beloved to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's something that we can also relate to very much. If you think about the fact that you have somebody that you love, somebody that you adore, somebody that you care about very, very, very much. Not necessarily a spouse, right? So you have a friend, a cousin, a yedid, somebody who's very, very dear to you, somebody that you love very much. And years down the road, you end up seeing a group of children. And in that group of children, somebody comes to you and says, there's a random group of kids, somebody comes to you and says, see that kid over there? And you say, which one? One with the red shirt over there? Yeah, that's not true. That's so-and-so's grandson. All of a sudden, everything changes for you. Isn't it true? Right? In other words, you don't know the kid. You've never seen the kid. You don't know the kid's parent. But all of a sudden, you hear that this one kid that's in a random group of kids is the grandchild of this person that you so loved and so adored and felt was so close to. Does it not immediately give you an endearment to that particular child that you know is the grandchild of that individual? Of course it does. Of course it does. There's no question about that. And that is an analogy. It's an analogy, just to be able to have a sensitivity to it. The nature of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's love for Am Yisrael. Am Yisrael are the children of Abraham Avinu, the children of his beloved, And that makes all the difference in the world. Where does the land come into all of it? So before we get to the land, I have to set that up and understand. So it's not just that HaKadosh Baruch Hu experiences Abraham's grandchildren in a random conglomerate of people, because the likelihood is that there's a ton of people on the earth today that are children or grandchildren of Abraham Avinu, not just Israel, but there's something more. There is only one particular line of Abraham Avinu that are descendants of those who were involved in the covenant with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in the pact, in the bond, Le'ol Me'ad, forever and ever, between God and Abraham and all the children that were to come after him of that line. The line, that's why Yitzhak and Yaakov are so important in this whole discussion and in the whole issue. We do not open our mouths to talk to God without mentioning that. Everything rests on that. That's why, it says in Pirkei Avot, now in the second perek, that the person who's Mizakir Rabim, who's Arsek B'tzibur, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Mesayah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu helps him. Why is he helping? Because there's Zechut Avotav. Because there's Zechut Avot, Mesayato, right? And that stands Le'ol Me'ad. Who's the Avot? We're talking about Abraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov. We're not just talking about general. The Avot. It stands for him. Le'ol Me'ad, for all time. Everything rests on that love, on that covenant. And so when HaKadosh Baruch Hu sees Am Yisrael, so to speak, in this world, regardless of where they might be on the spectrum of keeping the breed, there is a love for that people. There is a love for every member of that people. There may be an upset for the fact that there are members that aren't keeping and adhering, but of course there are a great deal of factor that goes into that, especially today. The love, however, is always there. Okay? And therefore, when we recognize that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is committed to these people, that there is a covenant established with Abraham for these people, it means that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is committed to the greatest good of these people, for the flourishing of these people, for the growth of these people, for everything that they could possibly be in this world. HaKadosh Baruch Hu commits to and ensures. So that begins as they become a nation with Yetziat Mitzrayim and the giving of the Torah and this entire counting period that we're running through in order to be able to develop our way towards Torah. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu is committed to that development. And because we happen to be beings in the creation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that are earth, that come from ground, we must have earth in order for us to flourish. It's as simple as that. It's as simple as that. In order for us to be able to flourish, we must have earth. And that's the truth with any human being. Any human being that is going to be the greatest that a human being can be must not lose his or her connection to the earth. What does that mean by the connection? It means that a person understands that I am earth, that I am the very Chera, as we call it, that it comprises the globe, that comprises the planet. And we know that as we are called Adam. And we say that Adam is called Adam because the Adam comes from the Adama, right? That HaKadosh Baruch Hu brings us out of the earth. And so that's why we're called humans. That's why we're called Adam. And that, if you have the source sheet, right? So take a look at the source sheet on number 4, right? And number 4 is simply, it's a pasuk from Bereshit, yeah? What it says in pasuk Bereshit, Vayitzer Adonai Elohim et ha'adam afar min ha'adama. HaKadosh Baruch Hu forms the human from the earth. Vayipach be'apav mishmat ha'im. And he blows into his nostrils life. That's why we're called humans, because we come from the humus. And so it is the very definition of who we are. And if it is the very definition of who we are, what we are, that we are essentially talking, speaking, conscious, earth, that's what a human being is. All the more so because we have committed ourselves to self-examination, development, and growing ourselves to be more conscious and to be more aware of our relationship with God and ultimately our own capacity for divinity in terms of that relationship, it must always be rooted in earth, on the earth. We have to have a place in which we know is ours and that belongs to us. Without that, we're roaming on this earth. And what happens if we are roaming on this earth? Something that we know now very well. It inhibits our ability tremendously to be able to tell who we are. It inhibits our ability tremendously in order to be able to develop ourselves in the best possible way that we can. Why? Because we're always on the run. That's why. Or because we're not sovereign. What does it mean that we're sovereign? Because we do not have our own authority to be able to live our lives as we wish to live our lives. We live our lives in terms of other people's determination as to how it is that we should live our lives. And that is how the nation of Israel has lived for the last 2,500 years. It's been extremely difficult for us to be able to be what it is that we hope to be, could be, had aspiration to be, or at the very, very least, what God has aspiration for us to be. And that is why it is always about the land. Because it's wonderful for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to love Avraham Avinu. And it's wonderful for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to commit to a brit and a covenant for him and his children after him, to be able to establish them as a people and flourishing nation, to be HaKadosh Baruch Hu's chelek, so to speak, his part in this world. It's wonderful. But if we don't have a place in which we can actually live out that play, in which we can actually live out our lives, be sovereign upon our own land, to be able to develop and manifest all of our desires and ultimately the destiny, then how on earth is that supposed to be able to come? Exactly, how on earth is that supposed to happen? Can't happen. And so the land becomes integral to the nature of the Brit, which is why when HaKadosh Baruch Hu opens his first words to Avraham Avinu, it's very simple. It's Avraham, lech lecha el haaretz. Go for yourself, right, for your own development and cultivation of your own life, for the own growth of your own self, to the land. It is in that land that you will have the width and breadth to be able to be everything that it is you can be, that I created you to be. Without that, you will always be on the run and moving. And so that's the challenge, essentially, right? So when HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to us, I am giving you this brit, and I'm blessing you with this brit. It's always, I'm giving you this brit and blessing you with this brit on the land. And we say this in our Shema. It's part of our Kriyat Shema, right? We say both aspects of it. When you're doing what you're supposed to do, you look at number 6 on the sheets. So your days should be plentiful and developed. Al ha'adama, on the land. Asher nishba Adonai la'avotechem latet lahem, that your God swore to give to your fathers. That's the promise. Of course it's the promise, because where else are we going to do this? How else are we supposed to be able to develop ourselves into the full potential that HaKadosh Baruch Hu established out of his love for us, to give us everything that we have, if we don't have a land within which to do it? And that is extremely important to recognize, that the nature of Eretz Yisrael, there's more to it than this, which I will develop, but essentially, the nature of Eretz Yisrael is not that it is an object of worship. It's not that it has inherent beauty and value in and of itself. Yes, the Pasuk says, Tzvihi lechol ha'aratzot. It's the most beautiful land of all lands. Eretz Avad Halav Udvash, flowing with milk and honey. Eretz Asher, Avaneha Barzel Mahareah Nachsub Nehoshet. The rocks are steel. You can mine copper out of the mountain. It's a beautiful land. It's a wonderful land. All nice. But it's only that way for one reason. It's because you need a home. You need a place where you can come to create, to build, to develop, and flourish. It happens to be that place. That's your place. So the borders are defined, and everything is very clear. And as long as you commit to the covenant, why should you not have your home to do everything that you dream of, to be everything that you can be? If it doesn't work, if there are problems with it, we say that in the Shema as well. That other aspect of it. It's not going to tolerate you. The land's not going to tolerate you. Why will the land not tolerate you? There's only one reason. It's not some kind of magic. It's just that, look, well, you're not interested in developing yourself. You're not really looking at the value of being Israel, wanting to have a commitment to the covenant. Okay, so there's not an interest in having a commitment to the covenant. There's not interested in developing oneself. Well, then there's really no need to be able to hold the house for the sake of being able to do that. Home does no longer serve a necessity. And if it was all a question only of what it is that you want to do in local terms, not a question of my self-fulfillment, not a question of how it is that I can be the best person in terms of the covenant and love that I have with God, that I can be, that all I need to do is make sure that I, put food on my table and that I have a place to live and, what to eat and so on and so forth, which are very important. Let's not get that wrong. Those are the basic drives of humanity, and those things have to be fulfilled. But if those become the ends, well then, all right. So the whole concept of covenant and higher levels of value and ultimately self-fulfillment in the highest possible way falls. And what we're left with is mediocrity as the goal. And if that's the case, a land, a home of that nature, a covenant of that high level is not necessarily central. And so if that's the case, then it would be cheapened to allow for it to be maintained in that way. But everything is based on being able to be that nation and be the people within that nation. And in order to really do that, if one wishes, if there is interest in doing that, there must be a place for it. So we see that this is the only thing that HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Moshe, basically, when he hires him. When you look at the hiring of Moshe Rabbeinu, there's a job description. And all Moshe Rabbeinu was asked to do, essentially, is to get them out of Egypt in order to bring them into the land. You take a look at number 8. All right, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu opens up, saying to Moshe, says, look, I have a job for you. There's a situation at hand. The people are in Egypt. They're stuck there. We're not able to, they're enslaved there. And what I need somebody to be able to get them out, if that's okay. So I'm interested in you doing that, Moshe. Yeah, I've seen what their situation is. I've heard their cries. And really what I need to do is to go down and get them out of there and to bring them into the audience. And that is exactly what HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Moshe. So he says, I got to go down and get them out of Egypt. To get them out of the land to a land that is rehava, that is wide and open and allows for all of the possibilities that will allow for a nation to become a nation, that will allow for a people to become a full people. You, Moshe, that's really what I need you to do. I need you to get them out of there, and I need to bring them into that land. That's the job description. That's everything. So that, in and of itself, is important to understand. That's the entire goal throughout all of our history. That's all it's ever been. It's been this promise to Abraham Avinu, which HaKadosh Baruch Hu keeps saying over and over again, Zacharti et biriti. I remember my covenant. I have my covenant. It's all about my covenant. And so we recognize that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has this covenant with us, with Am Yisrael. And literally the entire story of Jewish history is all brought down to that question. Are you home or aren't you home? And if you're not home, why are you not home? There can only be one reason why you are not home. And that is because you're not ready necessarily to get home, to be able to be sovereign, to be able to hold yourselves as sovereign in that land, and to commit yourselves to being the best possible people that you can be in terms of that covenant and that love that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has for Abraham and his children, the covenant that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is committed to for all time. Now, there's something else, of course, that comes out as a result of this. So it's more than just logistics. It's based in logistics, but it becomes something much more than logistics, of course. Because in the very same way, and this is important, right? In the very same way that as a result of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's love for Abraham and his children and commitment to the covenant that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has to Abraham and his children, there is a commitment of his presence among his children. What does that mean? That means that the body of Israel, the very physical entity of the Jewish people, is the recognition of it expresses this love and covenant with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. How do we know that? Because being Jewish at its base is genetic. It's who's your mom? And so a physical manifestation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's love is really what it means to be a member of Israel. Beyond that, there needs to be commitment to covenant, the practice of mitzvot, and so on and so forth. But we all know that if the mitzvot are not practiced, if they're transgressed, if it's done even blatantly, nothing can be done by a member of the people who is born biologically of the people to stop being that member of the people. Nothing. If that person in an instant wishes to turn around and be re-engaged and to keep a mitzvot and to be able to engage in the breed, it's done immediately. Nothing has to happen. There has to be no ritual. There's no change in whatever it is that this person already has the openness and right to be able to do that. Why is that important? Because it means the physical being of the nation of Israel itself expresses this covenant and love that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has with Israel. And the same is so for the land. We recognize that the presence of HaKadosh, it's harder for us to recognize it in the people. We don't think about it that way. There are dangers to it, which I won't get into now. It's harder for us to think about it in terms of the people. But it is no question true that it is absolutely the case. But the same is so with the land that was set aside for the people, that was meant for them to be the full people. And that is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence is in that land all the time. It's one of the most beautiful Pisukim, and where Moshe says to the people in Devarim, he says, this land is not just any land. He says it's an Eretz Asher Adonai Elohecha Doresh Ota. It's a land that the Lord your God constantly looks after, constantly looks towards, is always focusing on. Einei Adonai Elohecha ba. The eyes of the Lord your God are on that land. Bereshit Hashana ad Acharit Shana. From the beginning of the year all the way to the end. What does it mean when the eyes of God, when the attention of God is on that land always? It means that there is a sanctity to it, that there is something special and divine to it. And what happens when the people who in their very physical being, their very physical, base physical being, hold the attention or the value of God, come back into a land that is focused on and watched by God? It's like magic. It is among the most powerful synergies. And we've seen it in our times. It's so powerful that it scares us to recognize it for what it actually is. It scares everyone else too. Make no mistake. And is it not true that everything that we've seen in that land, when the children of Avraham Avinu have returned to it after being off of it for over 2,000 years, isn't it true that what we have seen is beyond magical? We've gotten used to it already, haven't we? We've assumed it to be there, haven't we? It's hard to know that during this time you can't go. There's no access. If you do access, well, you're quarantined for 14 days. It's only a taste of what it means not to have something that we have all become so accustomed to, that we've almost perhaps taken for granted, if it were not for a day like Yom Haasmaut. That if we care and if we awaken, if we open our eyes, and we, as President Reagan said, is one of my favorite lines from President Reagan that I quote all the time, don't be afraid to see what you see. If we are not afraid to see what we see the children of Abraham Avinu coming back to the land that he, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, swore would give to him because he loved him. Have you ever seen on this earth such an undying love, such a steadfast covenant and commitment? We shouldn't be here. And if we were here, we should be without name and sense of identity. But we are mitsuyanim sham, as it says in the Haggadah. We stand out, sometimes to our detriment, perhaps all too often to our detriment. But we are coming up to a place in which the purpose of the land is actually manifesting. We're beginning to see it. I don't know if any of you saw my discussion this past week with Ambassador Mark Regev. He's the ambassador of Israel to the United Kingdom. I mean, he talked about the fact that China just wants to know how the cows work in Israel because they produce the most milk. And their technology, they got a little thing that they put in the cow's ear that tells how they're feeling, whether they're sick, they're not sick, what they need water, they don't need. Just one of the unbelievable, untold things that are happening when the people of Israel come back into their land and are able, in that presence and in that wholeness, be everything that they were meant to be. And it's just the beginning. We still are downtrodden, and we're still killed, and we still have to sleep with one eye open all the time. The brachot of the Torah tell us there will be a time in which you will be able to sleep comfortably. You will be even able to leave your home 3 times a year, and they will be secure. I will watch, and you'll be able to come and sleep in my house in Yerushalayim. That's a requirement, by the way, of Aliyah the Regel when we go up to the Regel. You have to sleep in Yerushalayim. Those days are being manufactured in front of our eyes. We just can't believe that they are, but they are. It's crazy enough that we're there, but the promise has been fulfilled. And as it says so beautifully in the Psukim, where Kadosh Baruch Hu says, even when they're out, take a look at number 7 if you want to look at it. Even when I'm angry and I've banished them and they're in a timeout and they're out learning to figure out what it is that they're supposed to do with all kinds of hardships, and I am really tired of it all, I will not wipe them out. I have a promise to their grandfather. I love him and I love them, and I will not wipe them out. I will remember my brit. I will not abrogate my brit. Zacharti lahem brit rishonim. I'll remember the original covenant. Asher hoseti otam eretz Yisrael, the reason I took them out of Egypt in the first place, and bring them back. Has the world ever seen anything greater than that? And you wonder why everybody's nervous about us? Of course they're nervous. We're nervous too, because the weight of its meaning is almost a bit too much for us to bear. And we do all kinds of things to look the other way. Even on Yom Haasmaut, we celebrate all kinds of things. But at the end of the day, the only thing that we really should be celebrating is the love that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has for us. And for that matter, the love that we have for him. Because in truth, we've known at the heart of our nation, I mean the nation as a whole, we've known at the heart of our nation that everything that he has done, even its hardships, has been because he loves. Maybe hard for us to deal with, hard for us to reconcile, but deep down, perhaps not in the thinking place of our souls, our collective souls, we know that it's from love, and that's why we haven't rejected him either, as a people. It is the most remarkable thing. We are seeing, to me, there's nothing greater. There's no more proof that's needed. You should know simply from looking at history that there is a covenant. and there is a love, and that it is on, and that it is working right before our eyes. And the reason why it was always about the land, and it always will be, is because it's always been about the people. Always was, and always will be. It was about Abraham and his children. Always was, always will be. And the land is our place. And because it's our place, and because it's the focus of our covenant, God is there. And because we are the focus of that love and covenant, God is in us. And so I want to end this by reading this beautiful text from one of my favorite authors, a good friend of mine, Mark Halpern, who wrote an essay called Turbulence. All of my Talmidim have seen it. And so you'll forgive me if I read it again, but it's just so beautiful. And how could we not read it now? And so I'm going to read a bit of it for you because it's so eloquent. And by the way, it's printed in this wonderful book that Alan Dershowitz published a while back. I love this book. I love this book. I'm telling you, I was brought to tears 100 times reading this book. This is just a collection of essays of all kinds of Jews. The gamut of Jews, writing about what Israel means to them. It's the most brilliant book. It's the most beautiful book. It is a cherished book of mine because it's this that shows really who we are and what it's all about. That you could have the gamut of Jews writing passionately, beautifully about what Israel means. I mean, everybody from Rav Noach Weinberg to Natalie Portman is in this book. But Mark's essay is my most beloved. And this is what he writes. He writes about, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but he says, long after I first came to Israel as a volunteer in June of 1967, when I was 20, I actually observed day by day, what it is in particular that allows Israel to be more than just a Jewish Singapore. That June was the most buoyant month of my life. And when victory was unquestioned, Jerusalem was of gold. Israel had no gravity, and neither did I. It continues, I skip, but even as history reasserted itself and times grew, if not more difficult then less heroic, the passion that seems to flow up from the land of Israel in great and invisible waves did not subside. Of course, it never does, no matter what the difficulties. Some claim to see it in the quality of the light, or feel in the quality of the air, or sense in the quality of silence of Jerusalem and elsewhere at the tops of mountains, in the Machtesh Ramon, on the beaches of the Mediterranean, an indication of this passion, a special and at times even an unnerving intensity. This is quite so, and it is not merely a geological effect or the remnant spell of history. It is the turbulence of earthly things in the presence of God. Embrace this turbulence, for it is the wellspring of action in the heart of the nation. All else, every secular dream, image, and effort, every religious practice and definition, every monumental thing, like war or nation building, is merely its faint echo. I think that says it all. I appreciate very much your time and your presence, and for listening and for giving me an opportunity to share. I see you and miss you all very much. It's really, really good to see everyone. Thank you so much for spending the time. Thank you so much for being in here and listening. And Yehi Ratzon that everybody should have a meaningful Yom Haasmaut, even given the very difficult times that we're all experiencing now. And Yehi Ratzon that we should see in our days the complete and whole manifestation of our nation upon the land, sovereign, complete. I'll read one more thing for you that I wanted to, from Harambam, in terms of that, where Harambam says, in the end of Hilchot Menachim, he says, why is it that the Hachamim wanted so badly the times of the Mashiach? And he says, Lo nitavu Hachamim, is last thing on the page. Lo nitavu Hachamim v'neviim yemot HaMashiach, lo kadei sheyishletu al kol ha'olam. They didn't want Israel in order to be able to rule the world. Lo kadesh yirdu ba'akum, not to take revenge on any of the other nations of the world. V'lo kadesh yinas'u otam amim, nor for the nations to raise them up. Only one reason. Kadesh yu pinuyim, so they should be free and opened to Torah, to study the world, to develop and be creative. V'lo ya'alem nogesum votel, and that there should be nothing upon them that restricts their full potential from coming out. Eretz Yisrael is tailored for that. It is what it is meant for in terms of its position for Am Yisrael. And it's what it is that we need. And that's why I put at the very beginning of the page, the pasuk from Tehillim, where it says, Ratzu avadecha et avaneha, that the servants take delight in the very stones. It says that the Hachamim would roll in the dust of the Aretz, that they would do everything they could. They would cover the potholes so nobody would get hurt in the Aretz. That even when it was hot outside, they'd go sit in the shade just so that their experience of the Aretz should always be good and pleasant. That's what beloved people do. That's what beloved relationships are about. So again, sorry to ramp it up again at the end, but I wanted to read those things that I didn't read before. So I hope that everybody is well and good. It's my honor to share with you. All right, and with that, bid you good night and close.